But two of the questions were, how does your normal discovery process differ from a typical discovery process? And I hinted, the question came because I hinted a little bit that I take a little more time in discovery, that I go a little deeper, I'm a little more curious. And then someone said, yeah, I had the same question, but now I want to know, how do you balance the time in discovery versus time spent initially, filling the top of your funnel? So I have some ideas floating around in my head, and we chatted a little bit about these ideas, but I mean, how do you balance that stuff? How do you train people to balance that stuff?
Yeah, I kind of think about, well, first off, this is a really good problem to have if you actually have the problem. I find that most people don't actually have this problem. They just are really busy doing a lot of different stuff, and they're doing a lot of sales calls, and prospecting just gets pushed aside. So I'm a really big proponent of, if you are a full cycle sales rep doing your own prospecting, Anthony Iannarino talks about it. Jeb Blunt talks about it, Mike Weinberg. It's have that hour every day where you're building new. Mark Hunter. Everyone we to look up to talks about it. And I'm very much the same thing. So at a minimum, it's an hour of your day needs to be spent prospecting for new business. Now, if you spend more than that, I think it depends on a couple things. But the way that I always look at prioritizing my time is, if we look at that, funnel, you want to spend the most amount of time with the stuff that's closest to closing, and then work your way up. And it's as simple as that, with the time allocation that you have set aside for, sales.
I totally agree. I mean, what are you prospecting for? You're prospecting for meetings, right? You're prospecting for clients, but we know that the first stage of that sales cycle or sales process, once we've gotten beyond the initial introductions and the value propositions and whether or not it's worth having a conversation, the next step is discovery. Well, you're there. You mean tell me you're going to carry the ball to the 1 yard line and then you're going to turn around and go back to the 50 to try again? No, wait a second. Invest the time. Now, you have to make sure that there is enough prospecting being done. So that hour a day rule of thumb is a really good one, because if you not just because it's not often it's often not the most fun, right? It's difficult. It's one of the things.
It's not. It's probably the least fun part of the job for anyone that does it. I don't know anyone that enjoys prospecting.
So people don't like it, so they don't want to do it. So you got to make sure you do it. But even if you're just working 8-hour days, that leaves 7 hours in a day to do everything else.
So much time.
And I don't think your discovery call. Look, if your discovery calls are lasting 7.5 hours in a day, we have a different conversation to have, right? But let's think about what we're trying to accomplish. You go out and you do the prospecting, you find the leads, you engage them, you do all the hard work to get to the point where at least it's going to pay off. If you don't give it its just due, if you don't give it what it deserves to continue and move that down the line, you're missing the point. What are you doing? If you're not doing that, what are you doing?
Again, this is a very simple, nothing new or novel, Jeff, but a very simple, there's two things that I recommend that you could do structurally in your week, I think, that really help with this. One is my wife came up with this concept that we do in our relationship called a Sunday retro. And a Sunday retro is we spend 15 minutes and we do a start, stop, and continue in our relationship. You can do the same thing with your pipeline. So with your business or whatever it might be, the end of every week or the beginning of the week, do a quick, hopefully what you're doing is calendaring not only appointments that you have with other people, but hopefully your calendar reflects appointments with yourself. And hopefully you're able to look back and say, hey, 40 hours, how did I spend that time? What do I need to start spending more time on? What do I need to stop spending time on that just doesn't do any favors for me? And what do I need to continue doing? And if you just did that, if you made that a habit, that would be one keystone habit that if you did that every week, it would just do wonders, man. And if you wanted to get a little bit more detailed, again, this is a super old time management hack. Maybe Stephen Covey shared this. Spend 5 to 10 minutes at the end of every day, reflecting on the day real quick and just looking at the next day.
Yeah.
And then at the end of every week, just plan the upcoming week. And then when you're planning, do that start, stop, and continue. I guarantee you don't have a problem with, I'm doing so much discovery, I don't even know what to do with myself. I need to do prospecting. I guarantee you probably don't have that problem. Unless you resume in the last 6 months, you're probably not being so overwhelmed with sales calls that you can't fit everything in. I bet what you're probably doing is spending a little bit more time with people towards the top of the sales funnel, that haven't really shown any interest yet, but they took a meeting to your cold email because they're really curious about what you had to say and they're really not that interested. Or you're spending time doing a bunch of other bullshit, right? I guarantee you something like that is probably going on.
And what happens too is people perceive the threat of the problem and they make it a problem before it really is. Like, please tell me that you've got no time left because there's so many other things, so many deals you're closing, so many new prospects that you're opening that you don't have time to do thorough discovery. When that becomes a problem, let's talk, because that's a really good problem to have. But being afraid of that problem when it's not even close to coming to fruition doesn't make a whole lot of sense.